Alexa, open RoundyCube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Sitecore Habitat is a range of sites demonstrating the capabilities of the...
So that just kind of gives you a preview that we've opened up Sitecore Habitat onto Alexa. So you'll get to see that on how it's being used and how we integrate Alexa with Sitecore. Okay, and how we'll actually also have you, we'll also change content, and then Alexa will actually say that new content.
You wanted to know about a habitat module.
Okay. At least we know it wasn't scripted, so. All right, well, so that's good to know that there's several who's actually using Alexa, because why it matters right now, there's actually, there's 2.5 billion people actually use voice or text chat platforms. First of all, what is a conversational AI? It's not necessarily just speech. That's what it's famous for, or what made it famous nowadays with Alexa, Google Assistant, and all of that, and Siri. However, it actually started when you started actually going into your support forums and you started actually asking a question and something comes back to you. So conversational AI is not necessarily just about the speech. It's just about it answers back to you. So all the chats and Slack and all this kind of things actually is part of this statistic. So nearly 20% of US consumers own a smart speaker. I guess we're part of the 20%. I think Brett actually probably has about 10% of that 20%. So each kid has one, so basically, so they know when dinner is ready. And then there's 30 to 40% consumers say that messaging is their first choice channel for engaging with businesses, which is kind of a pretty good stat to remember. So if you have support, it's probably something that you may want to look into. And in Slack, about 10 hours, these are mostly the paid users in companies. They actually spend about 10 hours on Slack. And some of that using chatbots and those kind of things. So if you're using Microsoft Teams, there's also chatbots in there. If you're using UPS, they actually have a chatbot that you could use on Alexa to tell you about your rates and all those kind of things. So, and track shipping. So
I'm actually really interested in the group, how many people use Slack or Facebook Messenger as far as using their automated responses. Do you guys use that?
scared?
Do you use the tools in general, like Messenger and Slack and those kind of things? Okay. Yeah. It's just the automated stuff. There's not a whole lot of Okay. Yeah. That's what I was going to talk about.
All right. So we use it as consumers, but how does it actually pertain to us as companies, right? So how can we actually use it inside your company or for our customers? There's two types of applications that you guys could actually use it for. Obviously, the mobile apps or Alexa and all those kind of things. But conversational AI can also use for enhancements, like translations or sending an email back. For example, Google's Smart Reply, this was about 2015. It was controversial to where if things that are a little bit trivial or you don't really want to reply to it, you just click reply. Google's Smart Reply actually will create an email and send back a reply. So, so if you trust it, okay, good. Slack actually has, similar now with Facebook. You have, Facebook has social graph to where you see your updates, right? Of course, they just changed their algorithm, but on Slack, they do the same thing to where when you go on vacation, you come back and you have these thousands of updates or notifications and those kind of things, so files. So what Slack's work graph, they actually hired a computer scientist, I think, and he has a team of 19 people, tried to work this out, and what they did was basically come up with a way to show the most important things or relevant updates to a particular corporate user. So remember, Slack, these are mainly for the ones that actually paid for the service and it's being used in a business environment. So what it actually does, which is pretty cool, is actually know who the user is and actually know what their expertise are, and then tries to figure out and actually also know how the team is using Slack. And then based on that, it figures out what's the most relevant stuff for you, so you don't see all thousands and stuff like that. So, and And obviously, we'll use it also for sentiments if you have reviews and those kind of things on your website. You could use it to kind of pre-monitor your reviews. So these are just some of ideas. And here are a little bit more of what's actually out there. So people obviously use it for customer experience and branding. That's what we all know more. But Tommy Hilfiger, I'll just read this one, has been an early adopter of building customer relationships through conversational AI, with consumers returning to its Facebook Messenger chatbot an average of 3 times. When the retailer made their New York City Fashion Week collection available via chatbot, it drove about 3.5 times as much revenue there as through other digital channels. So that's pretty amazing, right? So, and then on the employee side, you could use them as recruiters, as recruitment. So Maya is an AI recruiter that engages candidates throughout the recruiting process, decreasing the time it takes to move from candidate to hire by 70%. So there's a lot of applications. You could also probably come up with a way to help a pregnant woman go through the 9-month process, have an AI chatbot to kind of present ideas on how to do Lamaze or other things, do exercises and stuff like that. So, yeah, well, you know.
They don't have a hand to like destroy in the process, you know. Like,
that's true. Well, you know, maybe another 5 years, you know.
Have you seen Ready Player One?
Yeah.
Well,
There you go.
have you seen Extinction on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Oh no, I think that was on Amazon. So, and that was courtesy of. So let me ask, what conversational AI do you guys know? Alexa, Google, Siri. Do you guys know Bixby? No. They're coming out with a speaker. All right, so Cortana. Yeah. Bixby, Samsung. So.
Oh,
Yeah. It gives you levels. So. All right, so these are the 4 famous ones. But in reality, there's like a ton more. Obviously, there's Facebook, there's Skype, Bixby, our favorite, and then DuerOS. DuerOS is actually by Baidu, Chinese company. Kick, Line. So if that's a lot, these are more of them. A lot of telecom, the more to the right, the more up, is a little bit more mature platforms. Okay, so there's a lot of companies actually are in that space. And this kind of gives you a little bit more of what's out there in terms of conversational platforms or bots. So it's not new. It just feels new just because of it made it famous. So why are we actually getting into this? At some point, like even right now, when Brett asks you, do you guys actually use some of these tools? Sometimes just the confidence level is a little low. But this is a nice little graph to compare how much things are getting smarter. So these are the different 2 types of Google Assistant, but these are the famous ones. So 2017, 2018, you can just see that all of them improved. The Google Home one, not as much, but I'm glad Siri did. You know, there's nothing else to improve from 31%. You know, so what they did is actually queried about 5,000 questions. The assistant replied back. So it says 94.5% replied back, but only 65.3 of that is correct. So that's how this, if you can read this one. So Amazon Alexa was definitely not very good at that time, but now it's a little bit better now. The Google Assistant on smartphone is by far the best one. So, okay. All right. So why now? First of all, it's just a lot easier to talk to someone or to something, right? Websites, you click on things, menus, buttons. That's not the natural way that a baby grows up. Maybe not anymore, but babies nowadays with their tablets, it's very natural now. But right now, it's still very natural just to talk to someone. Or, I mean, typing is still okay when you converse to like a chatbot, right? So it's just natural. On the business side of things, it has less friction. You allow the consumer to interact with your application the most natural way. So obviously, designing that interaction, that experience is very important. You can't just say, when they say hello, you just say hello back. You may want to actually do something better than that. And it also opens up a new set of audience for you. I personally don't really use as much of I haven't bought anything online through Conversation. I know Brett has, but I do use Alexa, so it just opens it up for those audience. And if you make it easy for them, then it makes it easier for them to buy things. And the technology is ready for prime time, although it's still improving. So you kind of saw a little bit of that. So, any question on why conversational AI? I mean, we all know we should look into it. So, okay. So how does it work? There's speech recognition. There's natural language understanding. We'll go through that. There's dialogue manager, application logic, language generation, and text-to-speech. That area is essentially covered by Alexa, and the other piece is covered by our code or Sitecore or whoever. And this whole process, if you want to read more onto it, is just called natural language processing. So all these different things are covered by different tools. But for our purposes, Alexa actually covers these four. So speech recognition is essentially speech to text. Natural language understanding is trying to understand what the user said and what you want to do. So for example, you talk to Alexa and you say, increase volume of TV. So it tries to figure out that you want to increase the volume of the TV by two units or something like that. Dialogue manager is our code trying to figure out based on what the intent is of the user, you do something with it. So that's the dialogue manager. Application logic is essentially like where your data is coming from, and that gets sent over to Alexa to generate the language. Now, Alexa doesn't really do this piece. We're actually doing that. Now, language generation is when you have a set of data and it tries to come up with a sentence for you. So Alexa doesn't really do that. So right now, you just have to say, if Alexa says, what's the date today? If you ask Alexa, what's the date today? We're going to have to hard code and say, today is, and then the date. So we're hard coding that instead of generating the sentence today is and then the data date, okay? But I'll give you, we'll discuss that a little bit more. And then after that, after we already have the answer in human understandable sentence, then it goes to text-to-speech and generate that into something spoken, okay? So that's essentially that whole process. For our purposes, what we're gonna do is actually break up the middle part, speech recognition, the natural language understanding. Let me just go through this quickly. So we're moving Alexa on this first and the last one. We're actually going to use Lewis. Do you guys know Lewis by any chance? Lewis is Microsoft's language understanding intelligence service. So that one, although Alexa has what's called understanding the language portion, right? Although Alexa has that to generate the intent of the user, Alexa wasn't really created initially to understand complex sentences. Remember, it was initially used for IoT devices, so turn on ceiling fan. So almost on, up, down, those were the intent of what those devices were used for. But it wasn't meant to like, okay, what's the rates of the savings in your bank? That's a different answer. It's not an on or off. So and try to differentiate that with something like, what is my current balance on my savings account, and how does that translate to next month, or something like that. So it gets a lot more complicated. So Lewis comes into play to where we try to understand a little bit more what the intent of the user is, okay? And I'll show you why we're using Lewis, and furthermore, because Lewis, you can actually retrain your model. So when people start talking to your Alexa, it stores the utterances, I should say, of what was spoken, and you can reclassify it and then retrain and gets improvement, okay? All right. And then the bottom part, natural language generation. We're not doing this piece, but you could use what's called Wordsmith. Wordsmith, they have really great examples. If, let's say, if you're reading baseball stats or looking at your, or if you play Fortnite or something like that, you got stats or something like that. You can feed it to it that you killed this number of people and blah, blah, blah. But it generates the whole clause or phrase for you. So it's really pretty cool. So, and then that's our part, Visual Studio and Sitecore. And let me just go back quickly here. And that's essentially what we're going to do minus the Wordsmith part. So I'll show you Alexa, Lewis, and the Sitecore and Visual Studio Code a little bit. Okay? All right, so what are we actually going to do? So, well, it's not that impossible. We're going to open up the Habitat website to Alexa users. We're going to reuse existing content, enable authors to manage content, control Alexa intents within Sitecore. So that's pretty important so that we don't hard code any of the things that a user wants to do with your website or that content. Collect XDB analytics for Alexa requests. Although we're not going to use this, I'll kind of interject in the code where you could actually do this. So essentially, you could say that if a particular content had been hit by an Alexa user, or you could create contacts on the Alexa user so that you can remember them and actually personalize content or the words. Try to remember the user or the device. We're actually going to do that. And then actually have a conversation instead of just me asking a question, different questions all the time. So we'll have Alexa actually ask you a question too. So, okay? So we're going to try and do that in about 40 minutes. All right. Any question on what we're doing? No? All right. So Amazon Alexa, as I said, we're going to use it for recognition and generating speech. It's mainly a pass-through device for intents. It's a pass-through because we are not allowing, we're not letting Alexa actually figure out what the intent of the user is. It's a device connector, so all the echo dots, show, and those kind of things. Authentication and account connection. We're not doing this piece, but just imagine that if you have a commerce website and you're connected to it, you can order things a lot quicker or show you new features based on your order history or stuff like that without logging in, because you'll actually give Alexa that information already. And also we'll use Alexa for session context. That means user information, device information, and those kind of things. So, all right, so let's see. Oops. So I'm actually going to switch over. All right, so when you guys go to Alexa and create an account, Alexa, it's free. You get this dashboard. It's very simple. Let me see if I can make it. Okay, it's really just a list. And here's my skill. This is the skill that we'll be working with. Oops. All right, so that's a skill. When you go into skill, you see this getting started. What we're concerned about, and the checklist here is what you'll basically need to do. So invocation name. You just tell it when you say open, Alexa, open something, right? So that's the invocation name. And remember that I said that we're just going to use Alexa as a pass-through, so it just collects what was said. So normally, you would have multiple intents, so on, off, volume up, or something like that. And then you have the different ways that you identified those intent. Say, turn on TV, so that's an on intent. Or you could say, please turn on the TV or the television or something like that. So you could enter all of those utterances here for Alexa to use. and identify that that's what you wanted to do. But for our purposes, we just want to capture what was said and then pass that to Lewis later. So phrase slot will actually have that information of what was said. So phrase slot, slot is essentially a container, and that container can be for anything. So for example, if you say, who is John Doe? John Doe would be a name, and you could create a slot called name, and then John Doe will be the value of that name. So it's like a variable. So what's cool is that Alexa will figure out what on that sentence that you just said, and then give you a value in a particular entity, and then you could use that for something, right? So for our purposes, though, we just want to know what was said. Okay. The last piece I want to show you is that in Alexa, you could actually have, you could have AWS Lambda function. Not sure if you guys created any of that before, but you could write C#, or you could download the development kit and upload it there. So that's the recommended way, but for our purposes, I am actually hosting the habitat on our website because I want to reuse our website, and I wanted to talk to it. So you just need to give it what the API is, the URL, and then since I'm in development mode, I just uploaded a self-signed certificate, so you don't need to buy a certificate just to try this one. So that's that part. So once that's done, you can actually do a test. And this is essentially Alexa. So I could actually talk to it and say, Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo. Let me see if it heard it. So welcome to Rounded Cube Alexa plus Sitecore plus Lewis there. So it gives you what was returned in terms of JSON. And I don't have my...
Alexa with Sitecore.
Yeah. There you go. And I could say, Alexa, what's today's date?
Well, you wanted to know about a habitat module,
Oh.
but I can't seem to understand what you said. Please try again.
Okay. Well, it sounds like I'm still within the context of my application, and it doesn't know anything to do with the date. So anyway, so essentially this is Alexa, and remember, I'm just on a website, so you could essentially recreate this on your website instead of typing. All right, distribution piece. This is Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo. You give it the different information, description, the different types of how to invoke it, and then certification. That's if you want to go to production already. Okay, but after all that, after you assign all of that, what you'll actually see is that on the phone, when you're actually setting up your Echo Dot or whatever, you'll actually see a similar skill that has the information that I just entered in here and try saying like that. So that's actually on my phone, and I just tried to give you an idea of how it looks. So, okay? All right. So that's the Alexa piece. There's really not much to it, right? So I haven't even shown any code yet. So. All right, so we go to Lewis. So what happens here is that we're going to use Lewis for speech-text analysis. That's where we try to figure out what was said. Intent identification, entity identification. As I said, Alexa uses slots. In Microsoft World, they use the word entity. And then associate a prediction score, confidence level, so you can figure out if you want to use what was predicted. And it has retraining on it. And we'll show you that. So, let me see if I'm still logged in. All right. So, Lewis.ai, that's where you go and sign up. Essentially, you'll end up having an Azure account and those kind of things. I have a couple of here, but the one that we're going to be using, if I can find my mouse, is the Habitat Alexa. And here are intent. So on Alexa, we just had the generic intent. Here, we're actually going to try and separate the different things that I want us to understand. So I want to know if the user wants to know a little bit more about project modules. You guys remember Habitat, right? It has project modules, foundation, feature. Those are the different layers. We want an intent. Do you want to know a little bit more about Habitat? You want to know a little bit more about maybe using the person module in Habitat where it has employee listing? Or we could even create one for news if we want to. Is there anything new today in terms of news? So those are the different intent that we want to do. So for example, if I click on one of them, it'll show the different utterances, list all the employees, who is, person name, list all the people in the company. So these are just things that I came up with that people might actually say to Alexa. And then when the confidence level is pretty high, then it will return the contact intent. And then I'll react something on that intent. So this little ones that says habitat, that person, that name, I created those as slot names or entity names. So essentially, they're variables here that I will capture things, what the module name is, or if I want to create an email, I can actually capture what the person's email body would be, and then put that into an email. Or I can just capture the person name, and we'll show you that pretty quickly. Okay? All right. Let's see if there's anything here. So this is the training part. As you can see, sometimes it just doesn't understand because of my accent or something like that. Yes, open police in the company. So I don't know why should I use Habitat. So here it's just telling you things that what's been said or what was used. What is the Habitat module Mojo? That's definitely not the one that we want to know. What is the Habitat module in the Habitat? That looks right, and this is the correct intent, the project module's intent. So I say that's good.
Oh, so you're kind of training it.
So I'm telling it, yeah, and then I'll delete things that I don't think actually match. Why should I use Habitat? That's good. Describe Habitat. That's good. That's a contact one. That's wrong. Future is wrong. So I'll just do that. And Mojo is, I don't know what that is, so I will do that. And then once you have that all done, you can train it, and hopefully it'll get better the next time you use it. So Lewis returns about 50-50, but you know as a person which one it is, then you could just switch it, and if you know it was wrong, then you can switch it. So hopefully it'll give that particular intent a little bit more score in the future. So Alexa doesn't allow you to do that, unfortunately. That's why we're using Lewis for this. So, okay? All right, so once I trained it, I could publish it. I'm on staging. I am Central Time, and then publish. And once that's published, it's ready to go with the new model, basically. Okay? And that's really it with this piece with Lewis. I still haven't shown you any code yet, so. So the code is what ties this one with Alexa, okay? So, all right, any question on Lewis? It's free, also. Good word, so.
Marco, as an end user, is there a way for us to not use Lewis or code to actually produce our own Alexa skill and things like that?
Yeah, there is the one I showed you with Alexa. Blueprints to where you can actually create one for your own home. Let's say you want to create one for your babysitter or something like that, and so it has information about where the diapers are and those kind of things. So your babysitter can ask Alexa, and then you could give it an answer. So you could have that, and you actually just go to the website, it's free, and it connects with your Alexa automatically, and then you can use that. So. Or house guest, you could have them, what's your favorite music, or what time's your alarm do you want? So those kind of things. So you can create that without coding, okay? All right. Even here, though, when you actually go to Alexa, there are already some pre-made skills. Obviously, you still want to change it. So when you say there's really no coding, it's really hard not to have that because of the logic. Unless you do it with visual stuff, there's really nothing like that. So, but there is an easy way to where some of the code you can easily upload and then change it actually online without actually having Visual Studio or anything like that. So, okay. All right, so we're actually going to go switch to our favorite, to actually code. So have you guys used Habitat at all? Looked at the solution? Okay. So Habitat is based on the Helix architecture. So we're going to reuse that, and you'll see the Habitat solution eventually. We're going to manage the dialogue. That means it gets called by Alexa, and then we call Lewis. And then we'll identify and manage the intent processors. So this one is the management of the intent processors are actually within Sitecore. We store the context, so who the user is. We'll do some analytics. As I said earlier, we're going to skip this piece, and then Sitecore is going to be used for content. Okay, and that should be obvious there. Okay. It essentially looks like this, the architecture. So first, you talk to Alexa. It goes to Amazon Alexa. And then step 2, it calls our API. Something's missing. OK. Calls our API. And then the API calls Lewis. Basically, it gives us what was uttered. Comes back with an intent. That's number 4. And based on the intent, it figures out, our code figures out which processor to use. So for example, I could have just done it, hard-coded the processor initially. But I want to be able to control and add more processor and scale in the future. Like, for example, I have a news intent processor, or I have a support intent processor, or I could have employee intent processor, or just general intent processor. So, but I don't necessarily have to build them all at once. So I could just add to it. So that's what we're going to do. And then each processor will basically talk to Sitecore. Of course, I could create another intent processor that just talks to, let's say, Salesforce if I want it to be, or to something else, to another database. Okay? All right, so, all right, here's some code. So first part, Alexa calls our API. API is essentially a controller, just a regular, not an MVC controller, just a service API. And it calls this code, and the 2 most important things here is the skill request and the skill response. You'll get those types from when you download the Alexa development kit. So you'll have a skill request and skill response. Skill request kind of tells you what type of request it was. Was my application just got launched, or is there an intent embedded to it, or is the user ending the session? So those are the different types of requests. The response is a skill response. And that, you can have 2 types of speech. One is just a regular plain text output speech, or what's called an SSML output speech. So another XML-based markup language. So a speech synthesis markup language, SSML. So another language to understand. So you could do things like, if you give a date, it knows that it's a date. So Alexa can translate that it's a date. Or if you want Alexa to whisper, it can whisper. So we'll show you that. All right. So that's the second piece of the code, which is identifying what intent, right? So to do that, we'll create a regular interface that just has one method called process. Similar to any Sitecore way of doing things, there's just one processor, one method, so that we could just call that when we find out what the processor is. So from there, the processors are actually stored, the intents are actually stored in Sitecore. So you guys know that that's Sitecore, and it just has the name describe habitat, which is actually the intent name that you saw in Lewis. And then this tells us where the code is. So, which I'm sure you guys have seen that before. So that Habitat QA repository implements the II intent processor interface. Okay? So to show you what that looks like, so there's a contact intent processor that we created, and that is, I think, is this one here, the contact intent. So when the code sees it in here, our content intent processors, all our processors are actually using dependency injection. So all that, you guys use dependency injection, any chance? I hope you do, because what happens is that this is just stored in memory, essentially, and then the code actually finds it using dependency injection, and that service actually makes it available to any code in your domain. And the part that actually calls that is once I know what the type info, which is this one, right? I get the type, so it just creates a type, and then using dependency injection from Sitecore, then it will try to find that DLL and load it up and make it into an intent processor, and then I can go ahead and call the process method, which is what we said earlier, which is what that is. And I just pass what the request is, the Sitecore intent that we figured out, and the intent response. Intent response is actually from Lewis, I think. So you'll see that running in a bit. All right, this is just for fun. This is actually what Alexa sends us. This is the skill request. Remember in the API, when it gets called, it gives you the skill request. So this is just kind of a synopsis of that. It gives you a context information. It gives you what the request is. So the request is list all the employees in the company, and that's the value of the phrase slot, right? That's from Alexa. Remember, this is coming from Alexa. It also has a timestamp, request ID, so it gives you a nice context a little bit, and then also gives you information about the user. It doesn't really have, it's still anonymous at this point. We don't really have any like name or anything like that, but it's still an ID regardless. There's the session information, and then the skill associated with it, which is that in Alexa. All right, so I'll do a quick demo. Oops, I can find it. All right, you guys can read that, right? All right, so the part that we said earlier about the post, that's the skill request, and all it's doing is trying to figure out what was the request for. When you talk to Alexa, it's either an intent, a launch, or a session end, okay? So the one that we're concerned with is the process the intent. That's the more fun one, so we'll go to that. We're going to skip a little bit of that. So there's the phrase slot. All we're doing is get the value from that phrase slot from Amazon. And then this little piece here, intent finder get intent sync, actually sends that phrase to Lewis. And then we get an intent response. And then that intent response gives us an information, which is the name of the intent, like describe habitat or contact intent, which is actually intent repository is Sitecore. It's a Sitecore repository. It grabs that one, it grabs a Sitecore intent, and from there, we call process. So I'll show quickly what a processor looks like. And that's really is the code to figure out. It's 242 lines with commenting, so it's not too bad, right? So a lot of the logic is really what do you do with the intent, which is the intent processor. So this piece here is really more of a dispatcher, okay? So on the processor, a quick example would be the contact intent processor here. So we have the intent processor. Let's see if I can make that bigger. Okay. And I have, where's the process? I'm going to see if I can find process. There's the process that we need to implement from the interface, and all it's doing is really let's not worry about this one. And what it's doing is really just trying to figure out, first, did you say list or the word employees with an S? If so, then you want a listing of employees. If you didn't say any of those words, then you just want to get a detail of that user, of that employee. So that employee detail actually goes ahead. I mean, obviously the paths to Sitecore content is hard-coded at this point, but you can be smart about that one. All we're doing is now the name here is actually coming from one of the entity values from Lewis. Okay? And then it grabs John Doe from that list. It could be a product information or anything like that, product name, or a SKU number or something like that, and then it gives you information about that. So if you want to know a little bit about what's the size of a particular product, you could definitely do that this way. And now we're just kind of generating the response. So for example, the name, I put that in there, and then item title, that's just regular Sitecore code. Gets the title of the code, and then it gives you a summary. Okay? So that's an example of a processor. So we're actually going to try and do that in terms of the code. All right. Okay, so just a quick note. This is what Lewis actually comes back with after I give it a phrase. So it comes back with, this is the query I gave it, which is list modules in the foundation layer, and then the top scoring intent is project modules is about 80%. Here are the different intents that we have in our system. There's the contact intent, none, describe habitat. As you can see, the project modules is the one that it figured is the intent, so which is correct for this purpose. And then to the right are the entities. So we have an entity called layer, which is foundation, which is good, because in our path in Sitecore, we need to use the word foundation as part of the path. And then also, well, that's just modules. So it says list, so I know it wants a list. Okay? And then the sentiment analysis, if you want to use that, it just tells you if it's positive or not in terms of the score. We won't be using that for this purpose. Okay? All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a quick demo. It's on my phone. All right. So I do remember some of the utterances here. So once this comes up. So first thing is we say, Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo. Let's see. Oh, I guess I was talking something else. Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Welcome to Rounded Cube Alexa plus Sitecore plus Luis demo. The last time you were here, you requested this. What's today's date?
Okay, so it actually remembers what I said. So it already remembers who you are. So what is habitat?
Well, you wanted to know about a habitat module, but I can't seem to understand what you said.
I was talking too
Please
much.
try again.
What is habitat?
Sitecore Habitat is a range of sites demonstrating the capabilities of the Sitecore experience
So it's
platform.
reading from Sitecore
The
right now.
solution
So
is
we'll
built
try
on
and
the
change that
Sitecore
later.
Helix
So
guidelines, which in NBSP focuses on increasing productivity and quality in Sitecore projects.
why should I use habitat?
The Sitecore Habitat demos are built on the NBSP Helix principles, which is a set of principles and conventions focused on simplicity, making the Sitecore solution manageable and simple, even as it grows and matures.
So I'm going to stop that because that's a long one. But it actually, these two utterances is very close. What is habitat? Why should I use habitat? So it made a distinction. So on the what, I was actually reading the summary, and on the why, I was reading the full description in Sitecore. So you could do those kind of things. We'll do a listing. So we'll see, try to do that. I have to open it up again. Alexa, open rounded cube Sitecore habitat demo.
Welcome to Rounded Cube Alexa plus Sitecore plus Luis demo. The last time you were here, you requested this. Why should I use Habitat?
All right. Who are the employees in the company?
There are 2 employees. They are John Doe, CEO, John Howard, CTO.
List modules in the feature layer.
Well, you wanted to know about a Habitat
I didn't
module, but
understand
I
it,
can't
so.
seem to understand what you said. Please try again.
List modules in the feature layer.
There are 15 modules under the feature layer. They are accounts, demo, FAQ, identity, language, maps, media, metadata, navigation, news, page content, person, search, social, teasers.
All right. What is the accounts module in the feature layer?
This is what you said, feature counts.
Okay, didn't
However,
understand me.
I can't find any information about them.
All right.
Did I misunderstand you? Please try again.
Yeah. What is the maps module in the feature layer?
The Maps module allows you to add maps with points to the pages of your website.
All right, so I'm going to stop there. I want to show you, let me see if I'm still connected to the internet here. All those utterances in Lewis. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can open up Sitecore quickly here if it comes up. Come on. Okay, let me get this quickly. Almost there. Come on.
Shows you what you asked for in your Alexa.
My husband's like, why do you keep listening to the same song over and over again?
Exactly. But like for a business that's, you're not only hearing it, you've got to digest everything you just asked.
All right. So we do have Bill Gates here.
Really?
Yeah.
He was
Just so you know.
hard to get his contract.
I mean, he did sign yesterday, so he just got the contract. It's contract for hire for 2 hours. So I actually have that not published right now, so that's why it wasn't mentioned. If I have my cursor back. Okay. So let's see if we can publish that. I thought it was published.
checkbox under change.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Come on. Come on. Come on, Sitecore. You're not that slow. Okay, let's try that again.
It'll pop the dial and tell you to wait. And then just get on with what it was doing.
Let's try it. Let's cheat. Is it publishable now? Okay, so I can publish that now. Okay. All right, so let's see if I actually have that in this list. Oops. All right, so Bill Gates is there now. So, all right, so if we ask Alexa now, we should come up with Bill Gates. So, Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
I'm not sure.
Alexa, oh, hold on. Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Welcome to Rounded Cube Alexa plus Sitecore plus Luis demo. The last time you were here, you requested this. What is the maps module in the feature layer?
List the employees in the company.
There are 3 employees.
All right, so
They are
3.
Bill Gates Chairman Extra, John Doe
So it's
CEO,
very
John
instant.
Howard CTO.
Who is Bill Gates?
There was a problem with the requested skills
Okay, I'll try.
response.
Who is John Howard? Oh, hold on. Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo. Oh, hold on. Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Welcome to
Okay,
Rounded
so
Cube
we're back.
Alexa plus Sitecore plus Luis demo. The last time you were here, you requested this. Who is Bill Gates?
Okay. Who is Bill Gates?
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
I guess I can't get Bill Gates. I'll try John Howard. Alexa, open Rounded Cube Sitecore Habitat demo.
Welcome to Rounded Cube Alexa plus Sitecore plus Luis demo. The last time you were here, you requested this. Who is Bill Gates?
Who is John Howard?
John Howard is our CTO. John is our super geeky CTO. Do you want to know more?
Yes.
Here's more info
Okay,
for
so
John
now we're
Howard,
talking,
our CTO.
right? So
P greater
that's
than
part of the
entrepreneurial
conversation that you
spirit
could do with
and
Alexa.
pioneering
So
technologist
so
with
all of
10+
this
years
information is really just
executive-level experience
coming
identified.
from Sitecore at this point. So, so yeah, that's basically it. Any question? Hope you're excited about it. I mean, it's pretty cool. You know, as developer, it's pretty cool, but actually in business, you can just imagine, and not necessarily only for revenue. I mean, it's for anything really. So if you guys can come up with use cases, I think it's ready for prime time for you guys to use it. So as Brett was saying, there's obviously experience design, but that now splits into 2, both in the creative side, but then now is in the communication, conversational now. So, so it's a different skill set. So, but the future is bright on that one. So, you know, maybe on the airport, someone's now selling you traveling with, you know, with some stuff, and you can ask it questions. So instead of just kiosk that's just waiting for you, you can actually go around you and ask you questions. So anyway, I hope that was good. If you guys have any questions, just email me, or I'm on Sitecore Stack Exchange a lot. So if you guys have any questions there, ask away. So okay, all right, thank you.